A reading from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 24. Suppose a man marries a woman and later decides that he doesn't want her because he finds something about her that he doesn't like. So he writes out divorce papers, gives them to her, and sends her away from his home. Then suppose she marries another man and he also decides that he doesn't want her. So he also writes out divorce papers, gives them to her, and sends her away from his home. Or suppose her second husband dies. In either case, her first husband is not to marry her again. He is to consider her defiled. If he married her again, it would be offensive to the Lord. You are not to commit such a terrible sin in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. When a man is newly married, he is not to be drafted into military service or any other public duty. He is to be excused from duty for 1 year so that he can stay at home and make his wife happy. When you lend someone something, you are not to take as security his millstones used for grinding his grain. This would take away the family's means of preparing food to stay alive. If any of you kidnap Israelites and make them your slaves or sell them into slavery, you are to be put to death. In this way, your nation will get rid of this evil. When you are suffering from a dreaded skin disease, be sure to do exactly what the Levitical priests tell you. Follow the instructions that I have given them. Remember what the Lord your God did to Miriam as you were coming from Egypt. When you lend someone something, do not go into his house to get the garment he is going to give you as security. Wait outside and let him bring it to you himself. If he is poor, do not keep it overnight. Return it to him each evening so that he can have it to sleep in. Then he will be grateful, and the Lord your God will be pleased with you. Do not cheat poor and needy hired servants, whether they are Israelites or foreigners living in one of your towns. Each day before sunset, pay them for that day's work. They need the money and have counted on getting it. If you do not pay them, they will cry out against you to the Lord, and you will be guilty of sin. Parents are not to be put to death for crimes committed by their children, and children are not to be put to death for crimes committed by their parents. People are to be put to death only for a crime they themselves have committed. Do not deprive foreigners and orphans of their rights, and do not take a widow's garment as security for a loan. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God set you free. That is why I have given you this command. When you gather your crops and fail to bring in some of the grain that you have cut, do not go back for it. It is to be left for the foreigners, orphans, and widows, so that the Lord your God who will bless you in everything you do. When you have picked your olives once, do not go back and get those that are left. They are for the foreigners, orphans, and widows. When you have gathered your grapes once, do not go back over the vines a second time. The grapes that are left are for the foreigners, orphans, and widows. Never forget that you were slaves in Egypt. That is why I have given you this command. The word of the Lord. A reading from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 25. Suppose two Israelites go to court to settle a dispute, and one is declared innocent and the other guilty. If the guilty one is sentenced to be beaten, the judge is to make him lie face downward and have him whipped. The number of lashes will depend on the crime he has committed. He may be given as many as 40 lashes, but no more. More than that would humiliate him publicly. Do not muzzle an ox when you are using it to thresh grain. If two brothers live on the same property and one of them dies, leaving no son, then his widow is not to be married to someone outside the family. It is the duty of the dead man's brother to marry her. The first son that they have will be considered the son of the dead man, so that his family line will continue in Israel. But if the dead man's brother does not want to marry her, she is to go before the town leaders and say, "My husband's brother will not do his duty. He refuses to give his brother a descendant among the people of Israel." Then the town leaders are to summon him and speak to him. If he still refuses to marry her, his brother's widow is to go up to him in the presence of the town leaders, take off one of his sandals, spit in his face, and say, "This is what happens to the man who refuses to give his brother a descendant. His family will be known in Israel as the family of the man who had his sandal pulled off." If two men are having a fight, and the wife of one tries to help her husband by grabbing hold of the other man's genitals, show her no mercy. Cut off her hand. Do not cheat when you use weights and measures. Use true and honest weights and measures so that you may live a long time in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. The Lord hates people who cheat. Remember what the Amalekites did to you as you were coming from Egypt. They had no fear of God, and so they attacked you from the rear when you were tired and exhausted, and killed all who were straggling behind. So then, when the Lord your God has given you the land and made you safe from all your enemies who live around you, be sure to kill all the Amalekites so that no one will remember them any longer. Do not forget. The word of the Lord.